Good evening. I am he, as you are he, as you are me, and we are all together. Welcome to Screamacelica, your Tuesday night entertainment. Russell Boyce, how can I help you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. What an intro, Kev. I love that, mate. Right in there with the Beatles, man. Brilliant.
So some folk would probably say Oasis, because Oasis maybe pulled that song into the consciousness of a younger generation. So, aye.
True.
When I saw them at the Cat House, that's what they ended with. It was a fantastic gig, that gig at the Cat House. That gets me thinking that, eh? What's the best song you've heard a band doing that you didn't realise was a cover version?
Oh.
That you
thought one which, without being too boring and saying the same band again, it was BDI when I seen them live, did Sons of the Stage by...
Sons of the Stage, World of Twist.
World of Twist, aye, and I just presumed that was one of their songs. You know what I mean? That was rocking, that, man. That was actually one of the best songs they played on the night, to be fair. They
definitely BDI'd that up, because when you actually hear the original version's more electronic and more... Yeah. Probably a massive Andy Bell influence that they actually chose that track, truthfully. Want to know what mine's is? No problem. It took me about a decade to realise Step On was a cover version with the Happy Mondays.
Oh, I knew that as well. That's mad, eh?
I always thought that was a Happy Monday song. I think it took me about 10 years to realise, to hear the original version. I went, what do you mean that's a cover version?
We could do a show on covers, like. You could do a show on covers and just discuss, like, covers you didn't know were.
Producer Paul will come in. There is a cover version of Fool's Gold by somebody, and I can't remember who it's by. Paul will come in and tell us. If you find it on YouTube after, obviously, you finished listening to us. But it sounds like the Stone Roses have covered this version. This version, the guy strips it down to a old soul sort of vibe, 1970s soul vibe. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
No, you hear that, like.
He played me at the last time I was doing the studio, eh? And I was like, Jesus Christ, what an absolute belter of a cover version that is. But you would really think the two versions, the cover version was recorded in the 1970s, and the Stone Roses had actually covered it in 1989. It's a belting version. I'm sure Paul will come back in. So, I was off yesterday. I kind of was off yesterday, and a lot of folks says I was like away getting interviewed for other jobs and stuff like that, eh? And I wasn't really. I was like, see that ship? It's moved in the Suez Canal. That was me. That's what I was doing yesterday. I was on a tugboat, making sure that ship moved, because I'm keeping the world moving here, especially with this show as well. Fool's Gold by Calvin Law. Everybody, check that out. Go on Spotify and check that out. Now, we may as well jump in the DeLorean and go back to the 16th of March 2013. So at this point, we've landed at a strange Celtic Park, eh? There's no Rangers in the league. They've been liquidated and they've had to reform in the third division. And our focus is on Europe. And Europe had ended a couple of weeks before that when Juventus had beat us 5-0 on aggregate over the two legs in the last 16 of the Champions League. That was only a couple of months after the unforgettable high that we had beating Barcelona on the night of our 125th anniversary. which sorted us out as being our 125th unbroken anniversary, which I might as well just get that in there because that's my wee dig that I always get in there. But I remember this game, and I remember the club at this time. The club's in a state of nothingness, and there's an uneasiness round about this club at this point. Even though we're top of the league, we're still in the Scottish Cup. We've just been beaten 3-2 off St Mirren in the semi-final of the League Cup, and we were utterly atrocious that day at Hampden. One of the worst performances I've ever seen us at Hampden. And this is Neil Lennon's third defeat at Hampden in a row at this point. We'd beat off Rangers, we'd got beat off the League Cup final with Kilmarnock, then St Mirren pap us out in the League Cup semi-final. In the games leading up to this game, we played Aberdeen at Celtic Park this day, by the way. I kind of haven't mentioned who we were playing. We had Drew with St Johnstone. We had been beaten by Motherwell. And also we had the week before we had got beaten by Ross County up in Dingwall after being 2-0 up inside the first 15 minutes, and we ended up getting beat 3-2. There's stories in the press that Neil Lennon is going to leave, is considering his position. This is after him and Mialby, after the Barcelona games, have appeared on every Sky programme gone, because they obviously know their stock's high at that point. Beating Barcelona 2-1, their stock is absolutely at its pinnacle. So they've appeared on Super Sunday, they've appeared on La Liga Revisited. So they've been touting themselves openly for other jobs. The players are coming under criticism for the management as well. Their attitude was being questioned, and the question was being asked if players really wanted to be there. And I'm like, I'm reading this like you, and I'm going, is this 2020 or 2013?
I couldn't believe my eyes reading it, honestly, today. I had so much fun in the mines today, to be honest with you. Reading up on the sort of background to the game, what the backdrop was, because obviously that season's always is, as you rightly pointed out, synonymous with the win over Barcelona. But you forget how quickly things change in football, and from that incredible high, as you rightfully say, come March, it was a wee bit like Lennon was throwing the toys out the bus again, out the pram again, toys at the pram again, and I couldn't believe reading it back, although it did take me back when I was reading it. I just could not believe when you were saying Lennon accused his players of wanting out. I think it was Fraser Forster had given an interview.
Aye.
Sounding a bit like that, and that had irked him. And then it's like you say, you go, this guy has. I remember, obviously, this season, there was an interview from him at Bolton Wanderers, and it was genuinely could have been from the current season as well at Celtic. And when I was reading that today, you kind of can't help but think, there's a real weakness there, that this guy is, on repeat when things aren't going right. It very much is the same reasoning that he's got behind that, and the same sort of lack of shouldering responsibility, I kind of feel as well. There seems to be a bit of a habit in it, and certainly at this period of time, whilst he's obviously, as you say, this management team's pimping themselves out, you've got him actually throwing the players under the bus at the same time. So, yeah, just a wee bit. It can get a bit toxic with Lennon there, I think, is what history's telling us when you do look over his managerial record.
And I find that quite weird that Dermot Desmond comes out last week and says nobody could see this coming. And you're going, well, if you look back in 2013, round about this time, then going into the following season when he did leave, it was very, very clear that the management and the players had took their eye off the ball. And the players taking their eye off the ball comes from the management, because the management, the discipline's not there. And when you read these comments in 2013 leading up to this game and games after this game and that, as you mentioned, the interview with Bolton, you're going, that could have been for October this year. That could have been for September this year, because his tone and the way that he tried to get a kicking out of the players, a kick in the players, never changed. And all the time at management, you even go back to Hibs. When you look at, he chucked the Hibs players, the rumour, I'm going to do the Neil Lennon air quotes again, the rumour, the reason that he got kicked out of Hibs is because he was throwing the players under a bus. There's one particular that he wanted to throw under a bus with a right hook, but maybe missed. I never saved that name, mate. We'll probably get a lawyer's letter now. So it's clear that the players are taking their eyes off the bus. But when you've got a player coming out in the papers, Charlie Mulgrew, saying the league is born without Rangers, is it any wonder that you're getting performances like the Ross County, Motherwell, St Mirren? Is it even this game that we're going to talk about, this showed signs of the malaise it was in the club, the laziness it was in the club at this point. And it seemed the fans agreed at this point. I can we all look back on it, and it's one of the things that the Rangers fans have said to us, he's never enjoyed it about us and he's turned your back in droves. But when you start going back into it and you start having a look, this game against Aberdeen, the official attendance was 46,395. But there was less than that there when you watch the footage back. I remember being at this game, there was far less than that in the stadium. You'd be lucky if there was 30,000 in the ground that day. I remember...
I'm glad you brought that up. Because when I was looking at it as well, and I think there is a subconscious among Celtic fans, deep down where you go, how interested were the fans and the players at that point in time when you did feel... You've got to admit it. I mean, it did feel like it was inevitable we would win the league. And therefore, I think the taking the eye off the ball thing was actually total, as opposed to just being the players. But the flip side of that, of course, being the Champions League performances. Now, you would think the less competitive nature they've got in the league at the time, or certainly their mindset is at the very least, the more they would struggle in the Champions League. That makes it all the more of a miracle, I think, what we achieved that season in Europe. You know that?
You could actually say that the management's focus and the players' focus was only on the Champions League once they got in the Champions League. And obviously, we get to the last 16. Fantastically get to the last 16. And we get back-pocketed by a decent Juve side. And that's it. The season's over. I remember walking at the Juve game, the home game, if they're getting beat 3-0.
That's right.
And talking to a guy for the Bannockburn Celtic bus, and he's going, no, that's the season finished. And you're going, well, at this point, we've still got a league to win, we're still in the Scottish Cup. But because we were out of Europe, because we were expected to win the league, that was it. The Europe was the big thing, and we were out, and a lot of people found it a bit hard to take. And it's a bit like this season. We've all got sort of written off this season because we've been ranked wrong. I remember at this time, I had guys on my supporters bus who would go to the pub and no bother going to the game. I ken that happens all the time, but there was more and more who were just turning up and they had no intention of coming out the pub and going to the game. They would have, and you had, and as I think you could see, you had guys that had season tickets who had no intention of using them either because of the empty seats at that time. If we would have turned up at that time, the team that day was Big Fraz in goals, Izzy, Effie Ambrose, Kelvin Wilson, Charlie Mulgrew, Mikael Lustig, Chris Commons, Joe Ledley, Barim Kayal, Tony Stokes and Gary Hooper. The two subs that came on that day, and this is what the podcast is about, these two subs and the music, obviously, in the later half of the podcast.
The late half.
The late half of the podcast. What was funny was Samaras comes on for Kayal on 61 minutes. Neil Lennon's optimum time for bringing on a sub. And Lassad comes on from Tony Stokes on 67 minutes. But this time, we're 3-1 down by the time he makes the two subs. We're 3-1 down after Chris Commons scoring after 12 seconds.
Yeah.
Chris Commons scores the quickest goal ever in the Scottish Professional Football League, straight for the kick-off. A great ball by Tony Stokes. It's a good goal, eh?
Brilliant. I think, do you know what it reminded you of as well? Just Commons' finishing, I thought, was outrageous at times. He was ruthless in front of goal. You got him the ball 25, 30 yards out, within that range, any closer at all, he's putting the back of the net. It's pinpoint. I mean, and you've got to remember as well, 12 seconds into the game, you've just started, Kev. You know what I mean? You're still you're looking for your first touch. He's just slotting it right into the corner with total ease. But again, I thought he had a couple of years spell where, for a midfield, well, I don't know, what position would you call Chris Commons?
You put him on the park and he was a danger in the final third.
But he didn't play, he wasn't a striker by any stretch, but he wasn't really a midfield. He didn't do much donkey work. He was very much in his own sort of role, but his finishing for a couple of years, it was, breathtaking at times. His goal numbers were outstanding. Did he make 100 or was he just short?
Oh, I think he was just short.
I think he was just short.
He was just short. He was just short. Oh, that's a bad one, that one.
I think he got 91. I think it was 91 goals he got, but that finish to me was just really, really good when you watch it, but actually it was very much just stereotypical Chris Commons at the time, Kev. It's nothing that we would be surprised at seeing,
I know, it wasn't, Then what sort of happens in the game is the team shuts off, goes into neutral, and just nothing happened for the rest of that half. Nothing actually happened. Nothing happened. We didn't attack. It was almost as if the team went, that's us 1-0 up, this game's won. And
that's back to what we were saying. That's exactly back to that mindset thing, isn't it?
Aye. So that mindset happens until 44 minutes, 45 minutes. Kelvin Wilson, who had signed for Nottingham Forest, and truthfully, he was having no a bad season.
That's right.
That season, he was having a decent enough season.
It was.
He's chasing a long punt, and he actually collapses like a veranda. He actually collapses like a wardrobe getting thrown out of a veranda. And Scott Vernon, who looks like the side of a bungalow, scores. And that's one each going in at half-time. Before you know it, 7 minutes in the second half, Celtic have went into meltdown mode. Josh McGuinness scores 2 goals. Now, these were Josh McGuinness's first goals from November it was. This is his first goal for November. The first one, Big Fraser Foster lets to go under his body. It's a horrible goal. Paul comes in with Commons, 89 goals, 72 assists.
I was two out. That's not bad.
I would give you that. I would give you that on pointless. I would give you that.
Cheers, my man.
Another one that McGuinness scores is a long-range shot which he deflects into the net. So, we're at 60 minutes. 63 minutes.
Hey, just to quickly as well, one of the things that caught me off guard, because this is why I love this so much, right? Gavin Wright playing for Aberdeen, I've completely forgotten as well. And it's him who hits the volley for the edge of the box. The McGuinness actually quite nicely I don't know how much he's meant it. It turns into like a flick that's the ball's quite high up and he's flicked it in. But Gavin Wright, I totally forgot he played for Aberdeen, man. And you see his celebration, he's running away like he's won the World Cup. You know what I mean?
I know.
You know what I mean?
To the wee band of Aberdeen fans who had bothered their backside to make the journey down the road. A lot of them actually come.
That game though. We can't say
no, they can't. We had guys that couldn't be bothered to leave the turnstiles. Never mind come down for Aberdeen. So see at this point, and this maybe shows you how bad a run we're on. We're looking at losing 3 games in a row. 3 league games in a row for the first time since 1994. What does that tell you about the mentality of the Celtic team at that point?
It also just takes you. It really does take you to this season, mate. It really does. I'm not just saying that. The similarities are glaring, and I think the more you think about it, the more you sort of look at that Dermot Desmond quote saying, "No one could have seen this coming." A wee bit of research by Kevin Boyce on a Tuesday afternoon. I'm telling you, Dermot, you've missed it, big man, because the warning signs of what's happened this season is, very, very similar to me when you're watching that back. And you've got to say as well, looking at that Celtic 11, it's a strong side. And I don't even think Ledley Ledley was captain that day, but Kyle in midfield certainly wasn't a regular by then in the midfield. In fact, I think it was rare that both Ledley and Kyle started together in midfield. I don't think that was first choice at all.
Kyle's getting a lot of abuse round about this time for his performances. His performances have dropped off a cliff. He's went from looking like one of the best midfield players that we've had to a guy who's struggling. I think getting done by Lee McCulloch a year before probably contributed to that. And I think when I'm reading back, I'm going, I think that abuse is a bit over the top, considering he was coming back for a long-term injury. But there's some of the players who, that first 11, if you go back to that first 11, is that a better team than what we've got now?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think there's a style of player in there that wouldn't maybe be as successful now. I know it's only 8-9 years later, but just Commons, for all the ability he has, can you afford those passengers in modern football these days? I'm not sure. If how well he would fit in the modern team. Or maybe it's Mavericks that were missing, things like that. But you look at Tom Rogic, and his football's got fitter and quicker, especially in the last couple of years. I think squads, especially domestically, I think are, razor sharp professional-wise now compared to what they used to be, and they are fit. And I think sometimes he looks like the pace of the game, and Scottish football's always been quick pace, but I don't know. I think stamina-wise, you've got to be a proper athlete now, and I'm not sure about that one. But I mean, you look at Lustig. I actually watched a few games from that era, the highlights, and you forgot just how mobile Lustig was as well. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's easy to remember his sideways passes and his love of a header. You know what I mean? Or his love of winning a shy. That's what used to drive me nuts. He'd always love to just knock it off the opposing player and out for a throw, and that was his safety net. But you look back at that era, he was up and down, mate, up and down that right. Rapid. He was really impressive. Ledley I always liked as a player. We spoke about Stokes last week and all the talent he had. Hooper would get you goals, I think, in any of the Celtic sides of my generation anyway. I think Hooper was a real natural goal scorer. And then, of course, you've got the likes of Efe Ambrose. It's hard to say what you think of him, eh?
It definitely is. It's probably a more balanced side. I would maybe give it that. If you look at the last 11 that played for Celtic and you look at this 11 looks more like a team rather than the 11 that played against whoever we last played against, Rangers, I think it was. I think that looks more like a team. And this team actually had a bit of mentality about it when needed. They seem to turn up. But again, we've slaughtered the mentality because, as we say, there's too many similarities at this point in 2013 and what we've actually seen this season. Now, we actually do get ourselves back into this. Yes. Mulgrew decides that he isn't bored and scores with a deflected shot after 68 minutes for a corner kick.
That's the worst goal, by the way. See Ambrose's attempted shot. Oh my! To take Arthur Montford's greatest phrase, and there's a stramash in the box, and it breaks to Charlie Mulgrew at the edge, and he sort of hits it into the ground. It hits a defender and goes across Jamie Langfield. And then we didn't really do much either. We've got pressure and all of that, but Langfield's no saving hangs left, right and centre. And it takes another corner kick in the 87th, 88th minute, and Hooper scores with a close-range header. Again, it's another stramash in the box. It's no a great goal. It's just Hooper's doing what Gary Hooper done at that time. In the right place, right time, quick reaction, headers at home, definitely, mate.
Aye, so we're back at 3 each with 3 minutes to go. And this old Celtic thing, you knew at that point we were going to win that game. For me, I remember jumping about the stand at that and going, we're winning this game. There's still 3 minutes to go. That's plenty of time. We're getting another big chance. And you were confident that you were going to get another big chance. And we got that big chance. And again, it was Chris Commons, free kick for the left hand, the main stand side. And he whips it in and he overshoots it.
Yep.
He overshoots it. It's a bad ball. Fair play to the big Tunisian Lassad. He manages to header it back across the face of the goal. And it is a bad header, but it's a bad ball. But he's managed to keep it in play. And it bounces. And there's big gorgeous George. He somehow manages to overhead kick it past Jamie Langfield, who makes what I would call that goalkeeper's dive when they ken it's in, but they just want to make an effort and they go, oh. And
totally.
Like, he knows it's in and he goes, I'm never getting this, but I've got to make an effort.
That's so true, by the way. That's so true.
It ends up in the back of the net. We go wild. Big Sammy goes wild. He takes the top off and he's twirling it round his head.
Love it.
And he's got a white vest on. I love the fact that he's got a white vest on. And, I mean, a white vest has never looked as cool as it does in that moment when big Hank Lustig tries to rugby tackle on misses and the whole place is bedlam and that. And you go, that was a fantastic end to a game. It was a brilliant end to a game. It's a game that's stuck in my mind, but there was so much wrong with that Celtic team, and during that game, it took us three set plays to actually turn that game round. It was the three goals for open play. It was 3 set plays.
Totally. Do you know what I found interesting, right? So I'm watching Samaras was a sub that day. Obviously, he was mainly getting used, I think, for the Champions League. He was the main weapon, wasn't he, in the Champions League?
Oh, this is for me. This is Samaras' greatest year at Celtic Park for what he done in Europe.
And do you remember? So this is the point I wanted to raise with you, Kev. I should have probably pre-warned you, but so we go.
I didn't warn you about anything.
No, true. But I like going. I like that. It's brilliant. So Samaras, remember the Champions League on at least 2 occasions was captain. That day I've just said Joe Ledley was captain. As I said, I watched a few highlights games. Kelvin Wilson's captain one day. Do you remember how often we rotated the captaincy that year? Because Scott Brown didn't play every single game, as much contrary to popular, probably folks' memories. He did not start every game.
No, you've pointed it out. Aye. Now you've pointed it out, it probably is a good point that maybe that's the reason that we are rudderless, because there's not a natural leader after Scott Brown in that lineup. But then again, looking at that lineup, Joe Ledley would have been the man, would have been the captain for me every day of the week. Yeah,
you would have thought so. But again, as I say, it was just one next match on YouTube I looked at, and it was Kelvin Wilson wearing the armband. And then I thought, Samaras was captain in Europe a couple of times. And before you, that's 3 off the top of my head. And I know if you did some real digging, I remember talking about at the time that he passes the captain's armband about too much. Mm-hmm. Me and my mates used to go to, for the away European games, I always go to like Molly Mullins and stuff and watch it. I remember it being a topic of conversation that he gives out the captain's armband. Remember in cup games and that, he used to just give it to anyone.
Again, that probably sums up where we were as a club at that time. We were completely rudderless, leadership-less, and history has repeated itself. And
100%.
History has repeated itself. But we can't delve too much into this. I think we need to have a look at the cult of Samaras, because for me, we've done this on ACSOM. We've still got an ACSOM website, and Laura's going to be updating it with us, and we are going to be contributing articles in that, so you'll be able to read our pish, never mind listen to it as well. And Samaras, for me, is the ultimate cult player, because Samaras was frustrating, he was inconsistent, but he's got moments. He's got a highlight reel full of moments, of big Celtic moments, which makes him absolutely lovable. And for me, that's how he's a cult player. I mean, let's have a look at Samaras. I mean, he started off his career at his hometown club in Crete. He was born on the whole of the island of Crete. How good's that?
Brilliant already. That's
brilliant. That's brilliant. And his dad was a professional football player as well. He moved to the Dutch side, Heerenveen. What I always remember about Heerenveen, they had the hearts on their kit.
That's right. The blue and white strip with the hearts over it.
They had the hearts on the kit, and he moved to Heerenveen when he was 18 years old. When he was in Holland, he scored 25 goals in 88 games. But it's great watching his YouTube video. Want to ken how? It's a younger version of Sammy. It's no the bearded version of Sammy. It's the version of Samaras that looks like the lead singer of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And Milan Baros. He's got that Milan Baros young look about him. And his highlight reel in Holland is absolutely great because his goals are pacey, he's gliding, and it's cool finishing. It's what you actually remember about him when he comes to Celtic. Any highlight reel you see of Samaras in Celtic is exactly the same as his highlight reel at Heerenveen, because he always scored the same type of goal. And he was a top goal scorer. He was a top goal scorer in Holland, and he attracted interest to Arsenal and Sevilla. But he eventually ended up moving to Man City for £6 million. £6 million, which at the time was a record for a Greek internationalist to move to any club. But again, it's really hard to imagine Georgios Samaras getting on with Stuart Pearce as a manager, eh? Because it was Stuart Pearce that signed him for Man City. And
Samaras be taking one look at him going, shut up, you.
I can't see Samaras putting up with the Sex Pistols getting played in the dressing room before the game and stuff like that. Eh? I think because he was born on the party island of Crete, I think he'd probably be more European techno, eh? Down the beach, Dawn and that. I can't see him taking the Sex Pistols to heart very well. Do you know who he replaced? He came on for Man City as a sub, right? Do you know who he replaced?
For his debut?
For his debut for Man City.
Robbie Fowler.
Close.
Andy Cole.
Andy Cole.
I knew it was one of the two.
He replaced Andy Cole as for his debut. Now, Stuart Pearce as your manager, Man City gone through a massive change at that point, spending big money, and Sven-Goran Eriksson coming in. His time at City was extremely limited, and the City fans actually booed him on a couple of occasions when he actually came on. Shame on them. Absolutely shame on them booing the big Greek god.
I'm delighted because it's their loss is our gain very much, mate. You know what I mean?
Aye. So he played 63 games for City, scored 12 goals, and he moved to us on loan in January 2008, and he was straight up with us. He says, I'm coming here to get games because I want to go to the Euros in 2008. Yep. And he was straight up with us. Came on the park, Scottish Cup tie against Kilmarnock, and scored an absolute perler of a goal with virtually one of his first touches. Cut inside.
I was talking yesterday, I was saying about how current side, I think, we might need more Hartley and Robson types, because we're in a war here, you know what I mean, to try and win the league back. I think as much as Hartley and Robson coming into that team that won us the league that season, the third most important player was Samaras' addition in January. I think it was something like 11 and 13 that season. I know I'll be slightly off, but it's something like that. He was a breath of fresh air in that Celtic team, Kev, was he not?
It was. He actually got Tony Haggerty. If Tony Haggerty is listening to this or watching this, he's not going to like what I'm going to say here. But he actually got a tune out of Jan Venegura Hesselink towards the end of that season. I know. I'm going to for those. We've got a WhatsApp group, and Tony's been very vocal about his feelings about Jan Venegura Hesselink this afternoon. So, I think Samaras got a tune. Venegura Hesselink towards the end of that season. Yep. And for me, it was no surprise when we signed him in the summer, when we signed him on a 3-year contract in that summer. And I thought we were actually getting a player. And we got a guy who on his day was unplayable, as we've mentioned, in that 2013 period in Europe. You've got the goals that he scored against Rangers, where he completely slaughtered the Rangers for 2 years, who were utterly frightened any time they saw him on the team sheet. Some guys have mentioned in the comments about a Samaras Sunday when McGregor charges off the line and he puts it in the back of the net.
So cool, wasn't it? So cool.
Then you've got to remember he signed for Gordon Strachan, then his goal in Moscow against Dynamo Moscow for Tony Mowbray. He scored two goals in Moscow.
Aye, because Dynamo was the one where he's sort of passed it in, hasn't he, in the last minute?
Aye.
And then the one against Spartak was the header, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. So there you go. He's, for a guy who was so frustrating, he had moments. He had moments of absolute brilliance, which for me means that he was like, he's fondly remembered for me as a Celtic player.
Well, okay, but I mean, you talk about big Samaras moments, and I did allude in my tweet to a serious bet that I won in this season, actually, funnily enough, which brought all the memories back. We played Barcelona at the Nou Camp. Mm-hmm. I'd had quite a few Guinnesses, not in my own pub. I'd went up the town, as I say, we always watched the Celtic games at Molly Malone's, and it turns out that night we got beat 2-1. But you remember Samaras sort of headers it straight into a Barcelona defender that completely deflects off and changes the direction of the ball. And I think we went 1-0 up, didn't we? And we lost a goal in the last minute of the Nou Camp.
Yes, I watched that game in Gran Canaria. And I remember losing that last minute goal. James Forrest never tracked Alaba back. That's
right. And I'm not I mean, I did like a bet probably, back then. I don't really gamble at all now, do you know what I mean? But obviously at this point I had the scattergun approach in the old Coutons, right? So I went on the Thursday, sitting in the pub, I was doing my shift to put a Europa League coupon on. £1,250 in my bookies account. I'm going, there must be a mistake here. Turns out I'd bet £2.50 scorecast, Samaras first goal at the Nou Camp, Barcelona 2-1. So I told you I did a few Guinnesses. I bet against my own team, which I wouldn't normally do. And Samaras getting given that goal was probably the biggest steal of all time, because his header was never would have went in, I don't think.
Aye, some of the comments coming in regarding Samaras, that's a fair lift, Russell, for a bet that you can't remember betting on, eh?
£2.50, mate. £2.50 and £1,250 back. I couldn't believe my eyes. Eh?
Paulo here comes in. He says, "No for me, Kev. Infuriated the life out of me. Bags of talent. Played one game in 6. I'm not denying that, Paul. I'm not denying that. But when I was looking back on this, sometimes time's a big healer in that, and sometimes he did frustrate the living daylights out of you. But he's one of those players that when he was like on form, he was a joy to watch. And it didn't happen often enough. But when it did happen, you loved the big fella because he loved us. I mean, who didn't love he got us? I mean, when he left Celtic, he says, "I'm leaving Celtic, but Celtic will never leave me."
Wow, I didn't know he'd said that. That's class.
That's what he says. John McGuigan does point up that he did miss a penalty after Samaras Sunday as well, which probably would have won us the league. He's right there. He did have his faults, but we're not going to say that we didn't have his faults. He was the right
guy to choose to take the penalty.
It was a lazy penalty. Do you
know, it's like a crux though, Kev, right? Because he is so laid back, that is sometimes like a good thing, because you go, he's not going to be feeling any pressure here. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't feel pressure the same way, but yeah, it was too cushioned, wasn't it?
It was too cushioned, and he telegraphed where he was going to put it. Then do you remember the penalty kick that he took for Greece in the World Cup, the 2014 World Cup against Ivory Coast?
No.
Oh, check it out on YouTube. So check it on YouTube. Frank Brennan's talking about. I'm going to bring this up to date because this has jumped out for me. I sincerely hope that Alan Nixon is talking trite. If the mentality fragile Eddie Howe, that's disappeared. Eddie Howe is any kind of done deal as an ex-Celtic manager. I don't know where that's coming from. So, seemingly Alan Nixon's a journalist and he's saying Eddie Howe's a done deal. Anybody else?
Can't go wrong with that.
Aye, but then we'll talk about Samaras. There's quite a few folk in the comments coming in saying he loved a cigarette as well. Seemingly he smoked 40 a day, and he used to have a cigarette at half time.
Brilliant.
For all the love that we've got for Sammy, we have to temper it by the fact that he was inconsistent in that. But I think he's an ultimate cult player.
Yes.
And he's far and away the best Greek ever to play for Celtic. So far. so far. So, do you ken what he's doing now?
No.
He left Celtic in 2014 and he is now the vice chairman of his hometown club, OFI Crete.
Oh, amazing.
He is now the vice chairman of his hometown club, the club where it all started for him. So there you go. But for me, Big Samaras is welcome any time back at Celtic Park.
Therefore.
Now, the other part of that winning goal was a guy called Lassad. Now, him and Samaras both look like the type of guys that a recently divorced woman from Darlington brings back from Cyprus and presents her to her family. Goes, here's my new husband. Both of them look like that. Lassad had arrived at Celtic that season. And again, he had came with no much reputation. He'd moved to Deportivo La Coruña, easy for me to say, in 2008 on a free transfer for the French second division. He actually scored goals in La Liga. He scored 5 goals in La Liga in his second season. And he scored one against Seville. I don't know if you've seen it. He picks the ball up about 40 yards. He runs past 2 guys and he Dave Neary toe pokes the ball right into the top corner for about 22 yards.
Lovely.
It's some goal. But Deportivo were relegated that season, and it was the following season that Lassad seemed to come into his own, and he scored 18 goals and he fired the club back up into the La Liga.
Yep.
Bizarrely, now this should have set alarm bells ringing for everybody involved in this deal. Bizarrely, Deportivo cancelled his contract that summer after he scored 18 goals to get them back into the top flight in Spain.
That's odd, isn't it?
It is odd. So then there's a bit of Levante, Valencia's Weir club, were going to sign him. They says that he had signed a deal with them. Seemingly he reneged on it, and he ended up signing for Celtic on the same day as Effie Ambrose and Miku. So I remember at that time Miku was seen as the bigger signing. He was given the number 7 jersey, which was far too big for him to wear. He looked very uncomfortable in it. But then again, I'm reading about Lassad, and I'm reading what Neil Lennon says about him when he signed. Neil Lennon says that the player would bring a physicality and a presence to the front line. And I'm going, if you watch any footage of when he's plodding about Spain's second division, you never see anything that once suggests that he's a target man. You never see once. He actually, at times when the Scottish game got a bit more agricultural, he looked like a pensioner gone head first into a gale. He was just getting buffeted about. He didn't have any physical presence whatsoever. So he turns up, and nothing much happens for a couple of weeks. And he played 16 games for Celtic and scored 3 goals before he left. Now, his first goal he scored against Aberdeen. Big Wanyama strolls through the Aberdeen defence, fires a shot for 25 years. The post is still shaking I think.
Oh,
The post is
what
still...
a rattle.
The post is still shaking in the northeast wind. And first time finish, and he puts it back into the back of the net. And you're going, that's a tidy finish. That's a right tidy finish. We might have a player here. And he looked very technical, and he looked okay. 11 days later, he scores his second goal against Hearts. Again, at Tynecastle, a 4-0 victory at Tynecastle. Chris Commons whips the ball in, and he's got a right foot volley at the back post first time under the Hearts goalie. Again, it's another great finish. An absolute perfect. It's an absolute brilliant finish. But then, between that and his last goal for Celtic, there's nothing. Absolutely hee-haw. Nothing happens. He struggles. He just doesn't look like the centre forward that's got to break in front of Gary Hooper, in front of Samaras, in front of Tony Watt, who was probably the third choice striker at that point, or fourth choice striker. It just never looked like it worked for him. Then his last goal that he scores for Celtic is once again against Hearts, and it's once again for a Chris Commons cross, and once again it's a volley at the back post. His three goals are peaches. His three goals, really nice. His three really goals nice his three goals are actually good goals. But then in between that times you've got I remember the game against St Mirren at Hampden, which I spoke about at the start of this podcast. He was utterly terrible that game, like a lot of the players at Hampden that day. And the player says when he left, he says he was never fit and he just didn't get enough game time to get fit. What's your memories of the fleeting appearances of Lassad?
Wasn't a signing that particularly excited. I remember him coming from Deportivo La Coruña, and you knew that they were a side that sort of fell from grace. They'd won the league only 8-9 years before. It was always someone it seemed that was destined to just be a sub for the last 15 minutes if he was going to make an appearance. And I thought his contribution was minimal, but the goals that he scored, when I watched them today, they were really classy finishes, and you could tell the guy obviously had a bit, one heck of a technique on him. Do you know what I mean? The type of guy that probably saunters about training, but it's worth keeping an eye on because he'll probably do something that you'll not see very often. Do you know what I mean? Just because he can. But not someone you could hang your hat on. Do you know what I mean? No way. And again, that Neil Lennon description of him really doesn't match the Lassad I remember watching at all. I don't remember any physical presence whatsoever. So I don't know where that came from. But I was thinking when I was looking at the Lassad signature, how many players did we sign in that first spell under Lennon? Frightening. And that leads me to the substitute that was playing as well. Antajic.
Aye, Bosnian, Swedish Bosnian young laddie.
I'm thinking to myself, he must have just made up the numbers. So again, as we do, Kev, we go down the mines, don't we? You know what I mean? And you've got to do some digging. So this Antajic guy who's on the bench here, I could swear blind I've never heard of in my life before. I didn't watch scoring a peach of a lob at Fir Park with a really nice cushioned finish, that lifted over the keeper beautifully. And he could only have been 17, 18 at this time. He's only 26 just now. And he's won a Lithuanian quadruple in his career.
A Lithuanian quadruple? Is that a card hand? I don't know. Is that a poker hand? A Lithuanian quadruple? I don't know.
I know, man. But it made me wonder, how many guys was Neil Lennon commissioned to sign at that stage? It was a free-for-all, mate.
I know, it's when you look back, and we spoke about it last week with Mohamed Bangura, and we started naming centre-forwards who came and went and didn't do nothing. And nobody mentioned Lassad. And it was just when we decided that we were going to do this game, I went, wait a minute, that Lassad's sitting on the bench here, and we've got Miku. We signed Lassad and Miku that season, in a season where we've already got Tony Watt, Hooper, Stokes and Samaras as the strikers at the club, and Chris Commons. So you sign another two. It just does them, and always goes back to the saying what Peter Lawwell says about Neil Lennon after they gave him the job in the Shivers at Hampden. He knows a player. Well, I think history points that you didn't ken a player, Peter. And I don't think Neil Lennon knows a player either. For Neil Lennon to say this guy was a target man, and I'm going, well, you've obviously never watched any of the footage whatsoever. Because, I mean, he was 6'2", so that's only bit of target that.
And that is almost like just laziness, isn't it? Just like his physique looks like he should be physical up front, so we'll just, he's 6'2", so we'll label him a target man, and he's going to bring some physicality up top. Just nonsense, isn't it, really? And I think, with regards to the eye for a player thing, I suppose when Lawwell said that, I was kind of in the camp of, he does, by the way, he does, because I'm thinking of all the good ones.
I know.
And it's, you do this show, and it just gets blown out the water, that theory. And, a broken clock's right twice a day. Do you know what I mean? If you sign 100 players, you're going to get 4 or 5 that are belters, aren't you? I would love to know how many players Neil Lennon signed in that first spell. I think it would be astonishing.
If somebody wants to do Screamacelica's homework for them, please go and do that and tweet us how many players did Neil Lennon sign in his first spell as Celtic manager?
Great question.
It would be a great question. Do you think it's got to be, I would say, over 50. I'm going for over 50.
I think that's spot on, Kev. I think it is over 50. I would definitely think that. I think you remember the boy for Juventus. I know we could go on and on here, but I mean, there was the boy for Juventus. There was.
We've got an hour and a half. We've been extended. We've got extra time.
Oh, is it an hour and a half tonight? Is it?
Aye, we've been extended, man.
Yes.
Public demand, seemingly. Public demand, seemingly.
That's brilliant news. But you know what I mean? Remember, there was just so many, and I think when you look back, it was very much trial and error. And, you talk about wage budgets and things like that. I'm not sure what all these guys would have been on, but you'd imagine if Lassad, we'll get back to him, is turning down Levante, who were in La Liga probably at the time, or agreeing with them, but actually preferring to go to Celtic, where he'd probably be aware of the competition for places. He would be, competing with 5 or 6 other bodies. It's probably because he was going to get more money at Celtic. So you wonder how much was squandered then, as much as there was a lot earned in the Champions League. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely. And people had a go at me when I says we were run shambolically. And I think when you see periods like this, where you bring in 2 centre forwards when you've already got 5 at the club, shows a largesse and arrogance that we could pick, that you could polish any sort of turd whatsoever and turn them into a player, turn them into money. And that's not the way it works. My good friend Alan Horn says to us a couple of weeks ago, he went, see, when you talk about guys that we used to sign in the 70s that were terrible, like Ronnie Galvin and guys like that, we used to sign guys for Hearts. And he went, you would know where they would come from. You can, he came for Hearts. Where did we sign Bayo for? Where did we sign Kamala for? Can you name the teams off the top of your head? You can't. You can't name those teams off the top of your head. So we're now signing guys from teams that you've never heard of. Subbuteo teams that get you 35 points in Scrabble to try and like get a star out of them. And it's a broken product. The guys who we've had success with have been linked to English academies beforehand or came from decent leagues. They've never came for the Czech second division. They've never came for your Skepovic's and Lassad for the second division in Spain. They've never came for there. The guys have came for English academies or they've came for the Belgian or the Dutch leagues. Yeah. That's just off the top of my head. So this, we've polished a load of turds in our time. It's fallacy. It's
fanciful, isn't it?
It's a myth. It's an utter myth. It needs debunked. That the last 10 years has been all sweetness and light. When you start actually going through it, we've absolutely pushed millions and millions of pounds up the wall on absolute dross.
You're spot on. Spot on.
That's my wee rant over and done.
No, but I think you're right to highlight that, because there is this mad, it's not a mad theory, but there is a common thought that Celtic work with project players, Celtic develop players, and they sell them on for millions of profit, and that's the model that Celtic work to and all this. And you go, well, the model's not worked because we've never developed in Europe really the past decades since we started doing that, other than obviously the season in question that we're discussing right now. But for me, it would be a lot more prudent to be getting guys in, that I don't know. I just think that, when you compare 2 millions, that add up. Is it no more cost effective to sign one player at 5-6 million that's got a far greater chance of being good?
You're completely spot on. You are completely spot on. And it's this whole, we've been a well-run club, we're a progressive club, we're this and that, and you're going, that's a load of bollocks, pal. Let's actually have a look at this. Let's actually have a look at it done. So Kamala was signed from Jaganolina Ballstock. There you go. 35 points at Scrabble. And Bio FC DAC 1904 Dunarask Strada.
Mental.
I bet you they two haven't even got a Subbuteo team.
I tell you what, we shelled out a heck of a lot of money as well. 3.5 million to a club that we've never heard of, 2 million to the Slovakian mob for Bio, and you think to yourself, those clubs must have been laughing. Not because the players are I'm not going to criticise them overly, but that just seems to me like money that they probably wouldn't be getting off the majority of clubs. You know what I mean? Offers for their better players.
Aye, I know. If you know your history, he mentioned a comment earlier on, and maybe this puts a kibosh on what I actually was saying. I was saying all our successes have came from England. He went, Ayeti is this season's Lassad. What do you think of that? Discuss.
Very good.
But we never paid 5 million for Lassad. We got him on a free transfer because his club had bizarrely cancelled his contract.
Or not so bizarrely.
The way it turned out. Now, he left after a season, and I think we can say he was a journeyman. He went and played in Portugal, he played in Japan, he played in Tunisia, then he went back to Spain with CD Toledo, that's it, CD Toledo, where he retired at 32 in 2018 after he suffered.
Right, doesn't it?
But he retired on medical grounds because he suffered a heart attack before a game against Real Madrid B.
That rings a bell, That rings a bell. I'd forgotten about that, in fairness.
So he hasn't played since 2018, and I read an interview with him when I was actually researching this, and he just says that he had a great career, but more things, his health's more important than trying to play football. And I don't know what he's actually doing now. Maybe he's in Darlington with a recently divorced housewife who met him via Tinder or something like that. But I don't know what Lassad's up to. But let's get back to this. Why are him and Samaras linked? Apart from that, I'm doing the Samaras celebration there, look at that. They're linked with that goal. Why are they linked with that goal? Obviously, it was a header back and an overhead kick. But why are they linked? What's so unusual about that goal?
Only time they're on the pitch together?
No. It was the last time Lassad touched a ball for Celtic. That was his last touch. That was the last touch of a ball in his Celtic career ever. He never played.
He still had a year to go on his deal. He still had a year to go on his deal at that point.
He still had a year to go on his deal at that point. So his deal was cancelled in the summer, and after that header back for Samaras, he never kicked a ball for Celtic once again. There you go. What a last touch. What a last touch, though, eh?
Oh, brilliant. Love it.
What a last touch.
It. And it's such a memorable style of goal that Samaras scores as well. That'll stick in his memory big time, do you know what I mean?
It will stick in his memory. And good luck to both guys, whatever they're actually doing now. I think producer Paul's in the background there. He's got to try and get Big Sammy on, eh? We've got to try, and
That would be amazing.
He's the ultimate cult hero, and I'm sure producer Paul will make it happen. Facebook user says 42 players in his first spell in management.
How many?
42.
Wow.
I says there were 50, but 42. That's a fair turnover of players in 4 seasons.
Turnover.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a lot. I mean, from my point of view, I did actually fear it would be more than that, Kev, to be honest with you.
So did I. I did fear it. I think it would be more than that. I wonder. This is for somebody if they want to do this. How many players has Steven Gerrard signed in his first 3 years? That must be high 20s, 30s anyway, maybe?
I think so.
Right, forget about that Wappet. Let's move on. Let's move on to something decent. Music. Let's move on to music. I'm just trying to get up what was in the charts at that point because I forgot to write it down. What was number one at that time? So it was March. See, underprepared this week, mate. Underprepared this week. So March 2013. What do you think's number one? If you have to have a guess, who do you think's number one? Justin Timberlake. Justin Timberlake.
I know. Yeah, Justin Timberlake. Yeah, that is who it was. And I didn't recognise the name of the song either. No,
Mirrors by Justin Timberlake. Haven't got a clue.
I don't remember that at all.
Having a look down, let's see what else is there. One Way or Another by One Direction, one of my daughter's favourite songs. She doesn't like the Blondie version. Going back to cover versions that we spoke about at the start of the programme.
It's all in a fight.
It is, aye. Ollie Murs was in the charts with Army of Two.
Superb. Good for him.
Yeah, Bond man, Russell. Do you like James Bond?
Oh, it's all right.
Adele was in the charts with Skyfall.
Yeah. I remember that tune.
I think that's a decent James Bond film. That I like Daniel Craig as James Bond. He's one of my favourite. He is.
Really?
Does he overtake? Does he overtake Sean as the best Bond ever? Maybe. I think he does. I like Daniel Craig as Bond. I think he's got the look, because Bond was meant to be a Marine. He wasn't meant to be Timothy Dalton or Roger Moore.
Really?
He was meant to be a Marine. Aye, that's how Fleming wrote him. He was an ex-Marine, so he would have had a bit of stature and stockiness about him, eh? And I think Craig has got that. The charts, the album charts.
Yes.
Number one that week, 16th of March 2013, Bad Blood, Bastille.
Never really listened to them.
Pass. Straight in, new entry at number 3, Pop Pickers, is Graffiti on the Train by the Stereo. Am I allowed to say Pop Pickers? Has that been cancelled, babe? Operation U Tree cancelled by saying Pop Pickers. I didn't care. Somebody needs to let me know that. Before I say it again. Graffiti on the Train, Stereophonics. You're a big Phonics fan. What did you think of that album?
It was alright. It was all right, mate.
It was all right.
It wasn't a timeless classic. Do you know what I mean?
Wasn't one of their best? I can tell by your nonplussed reaction.
It was all right, man. It was all right, but they've had a few spells that they've not been on fire, I would say. Do you know what I mean? Good festival band, brilliant greatest hits. I'm sure they'll have if they've not already had one. But I think Graffiti on the Train era. Yeah.
Yes, Esther Pona Boy. I did nearly say Graffiti on the Wall. I did nearly say Number 12 on the album chart was Jake Bugg. Were you into Jake Bugg?
Wow.
Number 12.
Wow.
I saw him support. I saw him supporting the Roses at Glasgow Green with the Primal Scream. Wasn't into him that much, truthfully.
Really?
Nah, didn't get him.
He seemed to get a lot of flack for not writing his own songs. Or needing help, and, you know...
No, Gallagher gives him a bit of abuse for not writing his own songs.
Really? Yeah, I mean, I can remember it being a thing at the time, and who really cares, eh, to be honest? As long as it's a good tune. If he's contributing, brilliant.
What was any re-releases? The very best of Neil Diamond. You used to own a pub. Neil Diamond must have been doing a storm in your pub.
Mate, honestly, money talks and it don't sing and dance and it don't walk. Honestly, hear it so often, it's so cliche, it's unbelievable. Do you know what I mean? It was the type of tune that I would actually just skip on the jukebox machine, Kevin, a Saturday night if I'd been particularly pumped that night by hundreds of customers. You know what I mean? I would just go, skip that. I'm not doing it. I'm not watching all you drunken idiots, you know, singing that song like your life depends on it and that. No way, man. I'm not having it.
So we may as well get to the albums that we've picked.
Yes.
This week, which were released in March of that year. So we give ourselves a bit of scope, so we can, because you can't talk about Bruno Mars and stuff like that, because that would just that would just be a street cred if we've got any. No, according to Scott Forbes, who's saying whining laddie voice like nails on a blackboard. Well done, Scott. Nice for listening. You can get your subscription back. No problem. Refunds are available at the door. So the album I've went for this week is Steve Mason. Now, for you who didn't ken Steve Mason was in one of the best Scottish bands ever called the Beta Band.
Oh, yeah.
You heard of the Beta Band?
Yeah. Of course.
The Beta Band were utterly fantastic, and Steve Mason in this month released his second solo album, Monkey's Time in the Devil's Mind. This was after his debut solo album was a bit more electronic. Mm-hmm. And I think it was released 3 years before this. Now, for me, this album was a return to form for Steve Mason. Yeah. It's got 20 songs on it. 20 songs, 59 minutes, but he had a bit of fun with this. Mm-hmm. There's a bit of hip-hop in it. There's a bit of big anthems. There's skits. There's samples. Mm-hmm. And it starts with... Steve has been very, very open about his battle with depression and alcoholism and stuff like that. And the album picks it up on that, because the first line on the album is he's lying awake as a 15-year-old boy thinking what's happening in this life. And then halfway through the album, towards the end of the album, it gets a bit angry, it gets a bit political, it gets a bit hip-hoppy, and it changes. Then the album ends with Come to Me Again, and it's got that kind of downward spiral again. So the album for me is like a story and goes in a full circle. Yeah. It goes in a full circle. That's cool. For me, it's a really, for me, and it's very, very playful. And for me, there's more ideas on this album than some bands get in a whole lifetime. Yeah, like 6 or 7 albums. For in these 20 tracks, he's managed to actually harness loads and loads of creative ideas. But there's also songs on this album. I mentioned Noel Gallagher there. There's songs on this album for me like A Lot of Love, Lonely, Oh My Lord, that if Noel Gallagher or Richard Ashcroft had written them, folk would be saying are the greatest songs ever written, because they're that spot on, they're that catchy, they're that got a crossover appeal.
Yes, I get what you mean.
They should have been massive hits, but the reason that they weren't is, like, Steve Mason's a wee specky boy for Anstruther. Yeah, and it was this was on a small record label. This, but I would recommend anybody to go and listen to this album. Had you listened to it before the day, Russell?
No, I never even managed to get around to it today, Kev. I was rushed off my feet.
Rushed off your feet at work. Like me yesterday, real life getting in the way.
I listened to my album when I did have the spare time because I wanted to kind of be taken back to that, which I had a lot of fun with as well.
Mm-hmm. For me, Mason's went on. He's released 2 other solo albums after this, and I would recommend anybody to check out like his whole back catalogue. And I'm talking about the Beta Band. Talking about the Beta Band. I'm talking about like King Biscuit Time, The Black Affair, and all his solo stuff. Scott Forbes comes back in, and I owe my apology. I apologise. Very, very sorry, Scott. I'll give you your membership money back. Kev, you're too sensitive. I meant Jake Bug. You guys are great.
Hey! Apologies, mate. Apologies on behalf of Kev. I always like you, Paul.
So, for me, this is a classic Steve Mason album which takes the seeds of the Beta Band and he's developed it. But you've got the song on it, what's it called? Let's see. Fight Them Back. It's a very political record because Fight Them Back's about the riots in the 2011 London riots. And there's a song about it, about there was a guy that got killed in Tottenham that started off all these riots when London basically got set on fire. And Fight Them Back it's like a war protest song.
Really?
And it's fantastic. It's a fantastic song. And it was actually used, Reebok used it for an advertising campaign called Fight Them Back. As you see, it's got that sort of this album's got that crossover appeal. So I'm having a look in the comments. Boards of Canada did release Tomorrow's Harvest. You Boards of Canada, man? Russell?
Never even heard of them, mate.
You never even heard of Boards of Canada? Oh, that's another one for you to check out.
I'm at my depth on this, man. I'm at my depth in your musical knowledge. I don't know about you.
Boards of Canada, another Scottish band, 2 brothers who come from somewhere up north, or they stay somewhere up in the Highlands outside Inverness. Fantastic. Instrumental techno, ambient techno, fantastic band.
Instrumental, ambient techno, is that what you just said?
Yes.
Oh, come on.
What's up with that, like? Aye, they're good.
Instrumental, ambient techno.
Aye.
Someone's at it.
No, we're not at it. They got their name Boards of Canada because they watched a film by the Tourist Board of Canada, and they wanted their first, and they sampled it. That's how they got the name Boards of Canada.
Wow, okay.
There you go. Right, I've educated you, so you need to educate me on David Bowie now.
Yeah, absolute hero, man. The next day, the album, when it came out, I think only David Bowie could do what David Bowie did at this point. Now, we're in the digital world very much by 2013, Kev, as I'm sure you agree. Keeping secrets on an ever-growing social media community, world that we're in, or whatever you want to call it, is nigh on impossible. And yet here you are on David Bowie's 66th birthday, I think it was. I never have notes of that, man. So if it was the 66th, who cares? It was something like that. He announces an album on his website, and along with a brand new single for the first time in 10 years. So there's all of a sudden, there's been no hype about this. There's been no word at all. And then in one day, boom, there's going to be an album next week. And here's a video for the new song, Where Are We Now? And it's obviously, I took it at the time as very much that single as Bowie's disappointment in the world. He was sort of almost like he's been away. Do you know what I mean? Where's he been? Because he doesn't exist on planet Earth, and in between all this. So he's came back to Earth, and he's a wee bit disappointed as to what world he finds himself in. I put the album on earlier on today, and I just felt, from track 1, for me, it's much better than the Black Star album that he did a couple of years later. I think Bowie's got, as much as I love him, I kind of admire it, he's got an awkward streak to him. He doesn't he doesn't always want to play Bowie songs to you, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's not going to just go with the stereotypical fans' favourite type of David Bowie music, unless that's the type of music he really wants to make. And I've got to say, I find with The Next Day, right from the first track, which is called The Next Day, you feel like he's having fun with it. And there's really it's really upbeat, good vibes. I thought the single that should have been the lead single was The Stars Are Out Tonight. Again, very much was him singing about, I've been watching the whole time what you're up to, referring to himself obviously as a star, which I like because there's a bit of arrogance in that. And again, sort of, I don't know, it was almost sort of making out, you're all rubbish or whatever's happening here, I'm not impressed with. That's the vibe I get from it. And then there's another track that really, really, I'd forgotten almost in my ignorance to all things good with music, mate, was Valentine's Day. Such a good tune, man. And just, Bowie is very best. And I think that album, as I said, I just thought there was something magical about it. Everyone had assumed he'd retired, myself included, cutting about with a Bowie tattoo and all that, and, boom, he's back. And suddenly you just felt like, this guy's just streets ahead. I think it was his first #1 album since 1993. And I don't know, I just found it was just inspiring at the time. And I suppose when you look back and you realise, I think his ill health had probably began already by then, It was quite an awe-inspiring comeback to see him selling so many records again. And like I say, just the real magic for me, getting the whole band to sign, NDAs, non-disclosure agreements and all that, and for him to still have that loyalty, someone would leak it in the modern day. Do you know what I mean? Someone's got to leak it. And for, I just thought that's the only Bowie could have done that. He makes you believe in magic. Do you know what I mean?
I must admit, and I will admit this, that he's never played a major part in my musical listening. And I think that's mainly because when I was growing up, my dad's record collection, he didn't have any David, his records in the collection. Yeah. My dad was more into Neil Young, the band, the Byrds, bands like that. And when you look at an artist like Bowie with a large back catalogue of work and a back catalogue that's held up on a pedestal, sometimes it can be quite daunting to actually go, where do I start? What happens if I start at the wrong place? And look, I've watched all the any documentary about him that's on the telly, I watch it. I love the Ziggy Stardust stuff. But then I'm thinking about 84, 85 Live Aid with him and Mick Jagger dancing in the streets. That big coat and all of that, and you're going, oh, it kind of is off-putting. It's just like people, like, I grew up in the 80s and it's the 80s Rod Stewart. Like, do you think I'm sexy? And like, that's rubbish. That's rubbish, Rod Stewart. Then when I love it. My daughter thinks she looked like Rod Stewart, actually. So when you've got an artist that's held in such high esteem, sometimes you have to take a step back and go, I'm a bit scared to actually go in and delve into that back catalogue.
I understand what you mean. And I think there's also a bit of you going, and I'll be honest with you, I think I would counter that with The Dark Side of the Moon last week, where there was a bit of me feeling like I've got to get this. Do you know what I mean? Like, you've kind of, because it's there, do you know what I mean? And it's got such a high pedestal that it's on. And I was feeling kind of like I wanted to, do you know what I mean? I'm wanting to connect with this. Do you know what I mean? I've got to call it as I see it, and I admitted at the time I probably didn't. But I did feel like I kind of, I don't know if pressure's the right word, okay, but I know what you mean, like a weight on you to go like, I get this music such as its reputation, its prestige, its placement, do you know what I mean, in musical, folklore and all that, do you know what I mean? So I do get what you mean.
It's like there's so many guys that I consider musical heroes who will say the moment their life changed was seeing David Bowie as Ziggy on Top of the Pops. in 1972. That was the moment it changed their life. And you go, wow, that must be a massive moment. But I feel like it's their moment, if you know what I mean. It's him doing that influenced the music that I've got into later on. And I'm going, maybe I didn't need to love that moment for them, because they've loved it for me and produced the music that I like.
Very good.
And so I must admit, when he passed away, I listened to the album Young Americans is on, and I never really got it. But a couple of people in the comments are telling me to start with Hunky Dory. A couple of people are telling me to start with Ziggy and just work my way through. I remember him more as Tin Machine, because that was a time in the 80s when, like, I was growing up and getting into music, and it was David Bowie who was doing Tin Machine.
That's right.
So I was like...
That's right. I mean, that's strange. I suppose you can't... First impressions and everything as well, Kev, aren't they? Do you know what I mean? When you're... If that's the era that he was relevant at that time, and that's when you first seen him, then I totally get that, why that would be, you know, your sort of... your first sort of go-to image of him in your head, do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. It is, and it's probably unfair on somebody that was as chameleon-like as David was. Kevin Hamsey in the comments, "We Could Be Heroes" was the tune I listened to as we marched onto the pitch at Seville. I love Heroes. I love the production of Heroes. When you hear how sparse, as I say, I've watched quite a few documentaries about it, and when you hear how sparse it was and how big they made it sound, Heroes was a fantastic song. And it is used on all these, like, sort of, what could you say, montages when England get put out the World Cup and penalties and stuff like that. And Dry Your Eyes by Mike Skinner and We Could Be Heroes by by Bowie. And strangely enough, Oasis covered it. Go right back to the start of the programme. Oasis covered
That's
Heroes
right.
by David Bowie as well.
Signed by Noel, wasn't it?
Yes, I think so, aye. And that would have been round about 2000 and... Don't Believe the Truth. Was it not round about that time? Well, maybe it was earlier. I'm not 100% sure.
2004, 2005.
I mean, I'm talking about. John Pauls came in and says the third LP, so it must have been a B-side on Be Here Now. Do you know what I mean? He's just came in. There you go. The man's a walking encyclopedia.
He is, the way, definitely.
The producer, man, he frightens me.
It's bizarre.
He frightens me. When I was talking about being into bands that were influenced by Bowie's legend, the next album that I picked, because I struggled this month, I've seen quite a few comments coming in about the Primal Scream releasing an album in 2013, this and that. We pick albums that were released in the month of the game that we talk about. Maybe we should actually do the housekeeping before the start,
I know.
Maybe we should do.
I know.
So we only look at albums that were released in the month of the game that we were talking about. So this game was in March 2013, so we're only talking about albums that were released in March 2015. The albums that we pick to listen to are in March 2013. When I was talking about bands that were heavily influenced by Bowie, Swede were one of my favourite ever bands, right? And Brett Anderson, the singer, has got a massive Bowie influence in everything that he done, everything that he does.
So funny, because literally I was listening to, what track was, I think it was track number 3 on the next day, which I can't mind the name of, and was going to say to you, that sounds like Suede, by the way, sir. There's you could see the links hugely. I was listening to it today. I think it was track number 3. I could be wrong. But one of the tunes definitely was very, very Suede, or Suede as you call them, esque. I meant to say that. I meant to message you that actually.
And this is where I remember reading that. I mean, for me, Swede were the band that gave birth to Britpop, because they were the first one to come across the barricades with sounding very, very British, sounding like a mixture of the Smiths and a mixture of Bowie, the Smiths. There was a lot of English sounding influences in them, and they released their first album in 11 years this month in March 2013, and they had went back to work with Ed Buller, who produced their first 3 albums, and it's no many bands that can lose a main member and produce an album like Dogman Star, then go on to have greater, Bernard Butler was a genius guitarist, genius producer, and he was seen as the main creative force in the band. But then all of a sudden he leaves, and the band go on to actually have greater success without him than what they had with him, and that usually doesn't happen. I mean, somebody can come in. Is there any bands out there that have lost a main member and went on and had greater success? I'm sure there is. I'm sure somebody will come in and tell us. But Swed are the only band that I've seen that happen with. Now this album is like a return to form. This is back up there way Coming Up, which they released in 1996, I think. Mm-hmm. The first song on it, Barriers, it starts off with a big rolling drum and all of that. And I remember listening to this and going, that's the song the Killers have been trying to write for 10 years. That was like, there you go. The Killers, who have been influenced by Britpop and British indie, haven't they wrote a song as good as Barriers? And this band wanders back after 11 years and just goes, this is the first song on the album, won't you? There you go. And this album is unashamedly sounds like vintage Swed. And I'm going, that's brilliant to come back after 11 years and go, we ken that the press are not going to give us any press. This is not going to happen. That's not going to happen. We're just going to make an album for ourselves. And their last 3 albums have been utterly fantastic. And they seem to all have that vibe with them. They're just going, we're just going to do what we want to do.
That's cool. Do they make much money, do you think, then, out of these sort of albums? What sort of record sales are they getting?
I reckon, well, obviously nobody sells records now. And nobody sells records now. And they make their money probably for touring live. And if you look at the venues that they're selling out, they will be making enough wedge to actually carry on doing it themselves. And they are on Polydor again. They are on a major label again now, eh? But if you look at, they sell out the Barrowlands, they're playing at I think they played at the Kelvin Grove Bandstand and they sold it out as well, which was 3,500. They've headlined a couple of middling festivals and that as well. So they have got a following there. But the following that they've got there is backed up by their new material. I mean, if I'm going to see them now, I don't want to see them doing a greatest hits set. I want to see them doing some of their newer stuff as well, because their newer stuff stands up with their old stuff.
No, that's fair.
And it's another fantastic. A lot of people go, Swed, I didn't reckon it was there. They've released 3 albums since this one in 2013, and each of them is better than the last one. And it's fantastic. For me, they're on a better run of albums than what they were in the mid-90s at this precise moment in time.
Fair.
A couple of people coming in. Vince Clarke left Depeche Mode in 1981. Now that's a shout. Depeche Mode became Vince Clarke. Who did I say? Vince Powell? Did I say that? Vince Clarke left Depeche Mode in 1981. Well, Depeche Mode went on and became bigger. But then Vince Clarke left and formed Erasure. Did he go to Erasure at that time, or did he form the band with Alison Moyet? Was he in the band with, am I getting completely mixed up here with my early 80s New Romantic band? Yazoo.
Very good.
My early 80s New Romantic bands there.
Fleetwood Mac.
Fleetwood Mac. A couple of folk have came in and says AC/DC. And I don't know enough about AC/DC's history to actually comment on that. Iron Maiden. Again, I'm not a big metalhead, so I don't know about that. Vince Clarke's a strange one, eh? In Depeche Mode, in Yazoo, in Erasure. 3 successful bands.
It's not bad TV, is it?
And that's a great CV, eh?
Not a bad CV at all, man.
There's no many, but there's no many guys can actually leave bands and go on to have as much success as that with other bands. The only other person I can think of, Fatboy Slim.
Good.
He said House Martins. House Martins. He was in that.
Fatboy Slim is just. I mean, I love telling folk that, like, if you're at a house party and they maybe don't know, you can tell if they know that it's the same guy or not. And you'll be having a YouTube party. You know, the party always ends up in a taking turn about picking tunes and that. And you put on Caravan of Love, and then when it's your next shot, you put on, you know what I mean, like Praise You, and like same guy.
Mm-hmm. Same guy.
Like, no way.
What was Beats International as well? He was in. That'd Be Good to Me. That's Fatboy Slim as well.
Is it?
That's Norman Cook. Yes, Norman Cook's on the bass of Beats International. And is it?
Oh my days! I did not know that.
Did you not know that Norman Cook played the bass on?
No, I know that song really well.
Wow. What's the other one that he was in? Was it Pizza Man? He had a number one with Pizza Man as well. He's had, as a quiz question, what artists have had number ones with two different bands? And I think there's 14 or 15 guys in history that have had number ones with two different bands. No,
so not necessarily a band in solo, two bands.
Two bands. Like, for example, Fatboy Slim had two number ones, two complete separate House Martins and Fatboy Slim. Paul Heaton, Beautiful South House Martins. So,
yes.
Two. Paul McCartney, The Beatles and Wings.
Wings.
I think there's another member of Wings as well who had, is it ELO and Wings? I'm not 100%. I'll need to Google the answers. Maybe that's your homework next week for the audience. Google.
That's a good question, that.
Google the answers. Mike Rutherford, if you know your history, that's the guy I was thinking of. Phil Collins, I'm not 100% sure about Phil Collins. I'll get the answers for you for next week.
I like it. We could put it on Twitter and just get loads of suggestions for it as well. I suppose folk will just copy and paste it for Google. No offence, guys, if you're watching, but that's probably
No, that's fine. I mean, we're like the BBC. We can't give out prizes anyway because it's against rules and regulations to give out prizes. You get a virtual prize. You get a virtual hug for Russell. There you go. Right, Russell. That's an hour and 31 minutes.
Brilliant, man. Love that.
Robert Ingram, Denny Lane, correct. Aye, Denny Lane, The Faces, and ELO, I think. I think so. Right, I'll need to leave this because it is now. we could be here all night. We could actually be here all night.
Easy, mate. Easy days, anytime.
Stuart Hararan does actually say it. An imaginary Larson tankard to the winner who can name anybody who's had two number ones with two different bands.
That's the shout.
Right, lads, thanks for tuning in. It's been a bit shambolic towards the end, but hey go. See you later.